Blood dripped from the polished mahogany desk, staining Harper's sensible beige pumps. She was just an auditor, a fat, everyday woman who preferred spreadsheets to shootouts, but her father's devastating gambling debt had dragged her straight into Chicago's brutal underworld. As Victor raised his weapon toward her trembling frame, a heavy, bespoke-suited arm blocked her view. Cassian Romano, the most ruthless syndicate boss in the city, pulled her against his solid chest. "Don't look at him," he commanded, his voice a lethal velvet. "You're under my protection now." Rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the Meridian Freight Logistics Building, blurring the neon lights of downtown Chicago into streaks of harsh crimson and cold blue. Inside the dimly lit accounting department on the 14th floor, Harper Quinn rubbed her tired eyes. The digital clock on her monitor glowed with the time, 11:47 p.m. She was the only one left in the office, a reality she was entirely accustomed to. At 28, Harper was an exceptional forensic auditor, but in the polished, image-obsessed corporate world, she was practically invisible. Harper was fat, a physical reality she carried with a quiet, unyielding dignity. While her female colleagues spent their lunch breaks discussing restrictive diets and spinning classes, Harper focused on her ledgers, wearing impeccably tailored plus-size suits that hugged her soft, generous curves. She had long ago stopped apologizing for the space she occupied. Her weight made people underestimate her, assuming that a soft body equated to a soft mind. They rarely noticed the razor-sharp intellect humming beneath her warm, unassuming exterior. Right now, however, that intellect was screaming warning sirens. Spread across her dual monitors were the quarterly transaction logs for Kinsley Harbor Imports, one of Meridian's most lucrative Midwestern shipping clients. For 3 weeks, Harper had been conducting a routine internal audit tracing shipping manifests against offshore payments, but the numbers were bleeding. There were phantom shipments of industrial textiles routed through shell companies in the Cayman Islands, returning as clean, taxable revenue in local Chicago banks. It was money laundering executed with a sophisticated elegance that chilled her to the bone. Over $4 million had been scrubbed clean in the last quarter, alone. Worse, the signature authorizing these bypasses belonged to her direct supervisor, Gregory Hayes, but the routing numbers pointed to a holding company owned by Victor Sullivan. Victor Sullivan was not a corporate man. He was a loan shark, a brutal extortionist who controlled the southern docks. And terrifyingly, he was the man holding a $200,000 marker over the head of Harper's estranged father, Thomas Quinn. Thomas was a chronic gambler who had vanished 3 months ago, leaving his debt and Sullivan's wrath squarely on Harper's doorstep. For weeks, Sullivan's men had been shadowing her, leaving subtle, terrifying threats, a slashed tire on her Honda, a dead cardinal, left on her apartment welcome mat, a voicemail consisting only of breathing. Harper's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the screen. Sullivan was using Meridian Freight to wash his dirty money, and if she reported it to the authorities, Sullivan would undoubtedly collect her father's debt in blood. If she stayed quiet, she was an accessory to federal crimes. Taking a shaky breath, Harper clicked the mouse, copying the encrypted ledger files onto a secure encrypted flash drive she kept hidden in her lipstick case. She needed leverage. If she could prove to Sullivan that she had his entire laundering network in her pocket, maybe she could trade the drive for her father's life and her own freedom. It was a desperate, foolish plan, but she had no one to rely on but herself. She packed her tote bag, her hands trembling slightly, and switched off her monitor. The sudden darkness of the office felt oppressive. Harper walked toward the elevators, the rhythmic click of her low heels echoing down the empty corridor. The descent to the underground parking garage took an agonizingly long time, the mechanical hum of the elevator amplifying her anxiety. When the doors slid open to the subterranean concrete cavern, The air was damp and smelled of exhaust and motor oil. Harper clutched her keys, threading them between her fingers, a makeshift weapon she knew would do absolutely nothing against professional thugs. She walked briskly toward her modest sedan, parked under a flickering fluorescent tube. "Working late, Miss Quinn." The voice echoed off the concrete sharp and grating. Harper froze. Stepping out from the shadows of a concrete pillar was Victor Sullivan. He wore a flashy silver-grey suit that looked cheap despite its price tag, his slicked-back hair catching the harsh overhead light. Flanking him were two massive men in dark jackets, their postures screaming violence. Harper forced herself to stand tall, refusing to shrink. She squared her shoulders, the soft curves of her figure wrapped in a dark navy trench coat. "Victor, what are you doing here? Your old man is still in the wind." "Harper," Victor said, pulling a silver lighter from his pocket and snapping it open and shut. "And my patience, it's completely gone. 200 grand doesn't just disappear. But then I got a call from a little bird in your IT department. Seems you've been doing some unauthorized digging into Kinsley Harbor imports." Harper's blood ran cold. The IT department was monitoring her searches. She had walked right into a trap. "I don't know what you're talking about." Harper lied, her voice remarkably steady, despite the terror pooling in her stomach. "Don't play stupid with me, sweetheart. You're a smart, heavy girl." "You know exactly what's going on," Victor sneered, stepping closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of cheap cologne and stale smoke. "You have a flash drive. Hand it over and maybe I'll let you keep your teeth." "I don't have it," Harper said, gripping her tote bag tighter. Victor sighed a dramatic, exaggerated sound. He nodded to the thug on his left. "Grab her bag. If she fights, break her arm." The thug lunged forward. Harper stumbled back, crying out, as the man's rough hands grabbed her trench coat. She swung her tote bag, hitting him in the side of the head, but it barely registered. He yanked the bag from her grasp, tearing the strap and shoved her hard. Harper lost her footing on the slick concrete, crashing hard to her knees, the impact sending a jarring pain up her legs. Victor laughed, picking up the discarded tote bag. He rummaged through it, his face twisting in anger when he didn't immediately find the drive. He looked down at Harper, his eyes flashing with lethal intent. "You think you can outsmart me, you fat bitch." He reached into his jacket, pulling out a heavy, dark pistol. Harper gasped, scrambling backward on the cold ground, her heart hammering against her throat. This was it. She had overplayed her hand, and she was going to die in a damp corporate garage. Suddenly, the screech of high-performance tires echoed through the garage. Two matte-black armored SUVs tore around the corner, their high beams blindingly bright. They slammed to a halt directly in front of Harper, blocking Victor and his men. Before the vehicles had even fully stopped, the doors flew open. 4 men stepped out of the SUVs, moving with a synchronized, predatory grace that made Victor's thugs look like clumsy amateurs. They were dressed in immaculate dark suits, heavily armed and utterly silent. The temperature in the garage seemed to plummet. From the back of the second SUV, a man emerged. The overhead lights caught the sharp, aristocratic lines of his jaw and the cold, dead-eyed calculation in his gaze. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and radiated an aura of absolute, terrifying authority. Cassian Romano, head of the Romano Syndicate, the apex predator of Chicago's criminal food chain. Harper remained frozen on the concrete, her breath catching in her throat. Even she, a civilian who spent her life buried in ledgers, knew who he was. Everyone knew Cassian Romano. He was old money and new blood, a man who controlled politicians and police chiefs with the same ease he controlled the city's ports. Victor Sullivan's smug confidence evaporated instantly. His face went ashen, and he quickly lowered his weapon, though he didn't quite put it away. Romano Victor stammered his voice, tight. This is a private matter. She owes me." Cassian didn't look at Victor. His dark, piercing eyes, the color of aged bourbon, drifted down to Harper. He took in her position on the ground, the ripped strap of her bag, the way she was trying to cover her soft curves with her ruined trench coat, breathing heavily. There was no pity in his gaze, only a sharp, calculating intelligence. Victor Cassian finally spoke. His voice was a deep, resonant baritone that commanded the space without needing to shout. "You have been skimming from my Kinsley Harbor roads. For 3 months my accountants have been trying to find the leak. It seems you were sloppy enough to let a Meridian auditor find it before they did." Victor swallowed hard, taking a step back. "I can explain that, Cassian. The money is all there. I was just holding it in transition." "You are a parasite," Victor Cassian said, smoothly stepping closer. "And I do not tolerate parasites." "She has the drive," Victor shouted, in a desperate pivot, pointing a trembling finger at Harper. "She downloaded all the Kinsley accounts. She's the liability here, Romano. Let me put a bullet in her, and we can sort out the money Harper's blood turned to ice." She scrambled backward, her back hitting the cold metal of her car door. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the deafening crack of a gunshot. She thought of her father, of the empty apartment, of the fact that she would die here because of a spreadsheet. Victor raised his gun again, aiming directly at Harper's face. In a blur of motion, Cassian stepped between them. His heavy, bespoke-suited arm shot out, shielding Harper's view entirely. He pulled her up by the lapels of her coat, pressing her soft, trembling body against the solid, unyielding wall of his chest. He smelled of cedarwood, expensive tobacco, and gunpowder. "Don't look at him," Cassian commanded, his voice a lethal velvet against her ear. "You're under my protection now." A loud, echoing gunshot rang out, ringing in Harper's ears. But she felt no pain. Cassian hadn't flinched. Trembling, she peeked past the broad expanse of his shoulder. Victor Sullivan was on the ground, screaming in agony, clutching his shattered kneecap. One of Cassian's men stood over him, a silenced weapon, drawn smoke curling from the barrel. "Gather the drive from her belongings." Cassian ordered his men without looking back at Victor. He looked down at Harper. She was a heavy woman, substantial and real. And as she trembled against him, Cassian felt a strange, protective possessiveness coil in his chest. He was used to the skeletal plastic women of his social circle. The woman in his arms felt grounded, soft yet structurally defiant. "I have the drive hidden," Harper stammered, her voice shaking, but her eyes meeting his with surprising defiance. "It's in my pocket, in a lipstick tube. If you kill me, you'll never decrypt the firewall I put on the files." Cassian's eyebrows rose in genuine amusement. The corners of his mouth twitched into a shadow of a smirk. "You are bleeding on my Brioni suit, Miss Quinn, and trying to negotiate with a man who just shot your blackmailer. You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "I'm an auditor," she whispered, clutching the fabric of his jacket. "I know the value of an asset." "Indeed you do," Cassian murmured. He slipped his arm around her thick waist, supporting her weight effortlessly. It sent a jolt of electricity down Harper's spine. No man had ever held her with such secure, undeniable ease. "You are coming with me." "I can't," she protested weakly as he guided her toward his armored SUV. "My car. My father's debt." "Your father's debt is erased," Cassian stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Victor Sullivan belongs to me now. And as of this moment, so do you. You are going to decrypt those files, Harper. And in exchange, I will ensure no one in this city ever raises a hand to you again." He opened the heavy armored door of the SUV and helped her inside. The interior was a sanctuary of black leather and tinted glass. As Cassian slid in beside her, his massive frame taking up the space, the doors locked with a heavy, definitive thud. The SUV roared to life, speeding out of the underground garage and into the rain-soaked Chicago night. Harper pressed herself against the door, clutching her ruined coat. She had just traded a loan shark for the devil himself. Cassian Romano sat in the shadows, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a hidden console. He handed one to her. "Drink," he commanded gently. "You are entering a new world, Harper. One where your brilliant mind and beautiful curves will be properly appreciated. But make no mistake, you cannot leave." She took the glass, her fingers brushing his. The warmth of his skin was a stark contrast to the cold danger in his eyes. Harper took a sip of the burning whiskey, staring out the window as they crossed the city limits, heading toward the fortified Romano estate in Lake Forest. She was no longer just an invisible overweight auditor. She was the captive asset of the city's most dangerous man, and heaven help her, she had never felt so terrifyingly alive. Massive wrought-iron gates groaned open, revealing the sprawling expanse of the Romano estate in Lake Forest. Rain washed over the black stone of the driveway as the armored SUV crunched to a halt in front of a looming neo-Gothic limestone mansion. Harper Quinn had audited the financial portfolios of billionaires, meticulously tracking their assets and offshore holdings, but spreadsheets had never prepared her for the sheer, suffocating gravity of standing inside a true criminal fortress. Cassian stepped out first, the downpour seemingly ignoring him as he opened her door. He offered his hand. Harper looked at it, broad-scarred across the knuckles, wearing a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than her entire college education, and hesitated before placing her soft, trembling fingers into his palm. His grip was warm and implacable, pulling her out of the vehicle and under the shelter of the massive stone portico. Heavy oak doors swung open before they even reached the steps. Inside the foyer was a masterclass in intimidating wealth, dark mahogany paneling, imported Italian marble floors, and a sweeping double staircase. Standing at the base of the stairs was a lean, sharp-eyed man in a tailored navy suit. He had a harsh, angular face and a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. Gideon Cassian addressed the man, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Status: perimeter is secure." Boss Gideon Shaw replied, his pale eyes immediately locking onto Harper. His gaze was analytical, cold, and entirely unimpressed. "Victor Sullivan is bleeding out in the back of a van heading to the warehouse dock." "And who is the civilian bleeding on your floor?" Harper realized with a flush of embarrassment that her knees were still scraped and bleeding from her fall in the parking garage, leaving faint crimson drops on the pristine white marble. She pulled her ruined trench coat tighter around her generous hips, suddenly hyper-aware of how disheveled and out of place she looked in this museum of a home. "This is Harper Quinn." Cassian stated his tone, brooking no disrespect. "She is a guest. More importantly, she holds the ledger to Kinsley Harbor. She stays in the East Wing. Have the staff prepare the Bordeaux suite." Gideon's eyebrows shot up, though his expression remained otherwise stoic. "The Bordeaux suite, Cassian. She's a security risk. You brought a Meridian auditor into the primary residence." "I do not recall asking for your risk assessment," Gideon Cassian replied, his voice dropping an octave, taking on a lethal quiet edge that made the hairs on Harper's arms stand up. "I asked you to prepare a room." Gideon bowed his head slightly, a gesture of absolute submission. "Right away." Cassian turned his attention back to Harper. He extended his hand palm up. "The drive, Harper." Harper reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around the sleek metallic tube of her favorite plum-colored lipstick. She pulled it out, twisting the base to reveal not cosmetics, but a modified USB connector. She held it up, but didn't place it in his hand. She forced herself to meet his dark, predatory gaze. Her heart was beating a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but her mind was calculating, sharp and resolute. The files are protected by a fragmented AES 256 encryption algorithm, Harper said, her voice surprisingly steady. If you plug this into any of your servers without the rolling sequence code, it will initiate a cascade wipe. Every file, every ghost transaction, every routing number will erase itself permanently. And I'm the only one who knows the sequence. Silence stretched through the massive foyer. Gideon looked as if he wanted to pull his weapon and shoot her where she stood. But Cassian smiled. It was a slow, devastating expression that transformed his ruthless features into something breathtakingly handsome. You are blackmailing the head of the Romano Syndicate while standing in his own foyer, Cassian murmured, stepping closer until the scent of cedar and gunpowder wrapped completely around her. Fascinating. I'm ensuring my survival, Harper corrected, lifting her chin. My father's debt is clear. But I want your word, Cassian. I decode the files, I give you the leak, and you guarantee my safety. You give me a new identity. A way out of Chicago. Away from you, away from Sullivan's men. Cassian reached out his large hand, gently wrapping around her wrist. His thumb brushed over her racing pulse, feeling the erratic, terrified beat of her heart. He gently plucked the lipstick tube from her grasp. You have my word that no one will ever hurt you, Harper. But as for leaving Chicago, we will discuss the terms of your departure once the job is done. Now go upstairs. Clean yourself. Rest. He motioned to a stoic housekeeper who had silently appeared at the top of the stairs. Harper, exhausted and aching, had no choice but to follow. The Bordeaux suite was larger than her entire apartment. It was draped in rich velvet dark woods and possessed a massive king-sized bed that looked like a cloud. The ensuite bathroom featured a soaking tub carved from a single block of black stone. Harper locked the heavy oak door behind her and leaned against it, finally letting out a shuddering breath. She had survived the night, but she had traded a cage of debt for a cage of gold. After a long, scalding shower that washed the grit of the garage and the dried blood from her skin, Harper walked into the massive walk-in closet, expecting to find nothing but empty hangers. Instead, she stopped dead in her tracks. The wardrobe was stocked, and not with standard model sizes. Hanging perfectly spaced were rows of high-end designer clothing, tailored specifically for a plus-sized woman. There were exquisite cashmere sweaters, silk blouses from Marina Rinaldi, perfectly cut slacks, and luxurious lace lingerie that would accommodate her full breasts and thick thighs. Next to the clothing were several pairs of shoes in her exact size. Cassian hadn't just provided clothes. He had ordered his people to map her physical dimensions perfectly within the hour she had been traveling in his car. He saw her. He didn't expect her to squeeze into something meant for a smaller woman, nor did he hide her figure under shapeless sacks. He had provided garments meant to display her curves with absolute, unapologetic power. Harper slipped on a set of deep burgundy silk pajamas that draped beautifully over her heavy hips and soft stomach. As she sat on the edge of the massive bed, a soft knock echoed at the door. Before she could answer, Cassian walked in carrying a silver tray. He had shed his suit jacket and tie, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the dark ink of a syndicate tattoo on his collarbone. He set the tray on the bedside table. It held a steaming plate of homemade pasta, fresh bread, and a glass of red wine. Eat, he instructed, his eyes dragging slowly appreciatively over her silk-clad curves. You need your strength. Tomorrow you show me exactly how brilliant that beautiful mind of yours really is." Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate's secure library, illuminating thousands of rare first editions and casting long golden shadows across the Persian rugs. The storm from the previous night had broken, leaving the morning sky a crisp, painfully clear blue. Yet inside the library the atmosphere was thick with suffocating tension. Harper sat behind a massive antique mahogany desk, her fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard of a high-end encrypted laptop Cassian's tech division had provided. She wore one of the cashmere sweaters from the closet, a soft, muted emerald green that brought out the golden flecks in her hazel eyes, and tailored black slacks that hugged her thick thighs comfortably. She felt grounded, armored by the clothes and the breakfast she had consumed. Cassian stood directly behind her chair, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his massive frame. He watched the screen intently, his hands resting flat on the desk on either side of her, effectively caging her in. Every time he shifted his weight, his chest brushed against her shoulder, sending a shock wave of electricity straight to her core. "You're using a nested shell corporation structure," Harper explained, her professional persona taking over, pushing her fear to the back of her mind. "Kinsley Harbor invoices Meridian Freight for logistics and warehousing. Standard procedure. But someone manipulated the AP routing system. Instead of the funds going to Kinsley's primary account, they are diverted into 3 separate holding LLCs in the Cayman Islands. Victor Sullivan's accounts." Cassian said, his voice a low rumble vibrating near her ear. "That's what I thought initially," Harper said, her brow furrowing as she executed a series of keystrokes running her rolling decryption sequence. The screen flashed green and folders began to unpack rapidly. "Victor is the collector, the brute force on the ground. But Victor isn't smart enough to build an offshore labyrinth like this. Look at the secondary routing." She clicked on a newly decrypted spreadsheet, highlighting a column of outgoing wire transfers. Once the money sits in the Caymans for 72 hours, it gets bounced back stateside into a real estate development firm in Boston. Trinity Holdings. Harper looked up, craning her neck to meet Cassian's dark eyes. "Victor Sullivan isn't washing your money for himself, Cassian. He's washing it for someone else. He's just the middleman." Cassian's expression turned utterly terrifying. The calm, calculating boss vanished, replaced by a predator staring at a lethal threat. He stood up straight, his jaw clenching so hard she heard his teeth grind. Trinity Holdings Cassian whispered the name dripping with pure, unadulterated venom. "Declan Gallagher." Harper shivered at the tone. She knew the name from the news. Declan Gallagher was the head of the Irish mob in Boston, a notoriously violent syndicate that had been trying to push their drug trade into Chicago's ports for the last 3 years. Cassian had successfully blocked them at every turn, starving them out. But if Gallagher had found a way to siphon Cassian's own money to fund a hostile takeover— "It gets worse," Harper said quietly, her finger trembling slightly as she pointed to the bottom of the ledger. "To authorize these bypasses, you need a 2-factor authentication from someone inside your organization. Someone with executive clearance who can approve Meridian Freight's invoices without flagging the syndicate's internal auditors." Cassian leaned down again, his eyes tracking her finger. "Who signed it?" "Harper." "The digital signature is encrypted, but I traced the IP address of the authorization terminal." She said, her fingers flying over the keys to pull up the final firewall log. "It wasn't done from Meridian. It was done from a terminal registered to one of your front businesses. The Cobalt Lounge." The silence in the library was absolute, heavy enough to crush bone. The Cobalt Lounge was managed by Leo Rossi Cassian's top enforcer, and a capo who had sworn a blood oath to the Romano family 20 years ago. Leo Cassian breathed out the betrayal hitting him like a physical blow. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. The stillness that overtook him was infinitely more dangerous. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, dialing a single number. Gideon Cassian said softly into the receiver, "Lock down the estate. Bring me Leo Rossi. If he resists, shoot him in the legs, but keep him breathing." He hung up the phone and looked down at Harper. For a brief second, the lethal mask slipped, and he looked at her with genuine awe. "You unraveled a treasonous plot in 2 hours that my best accountants couldn't find in 3 months. You are magnificent, Harper." A deep flush crept up Harper's neck. She wasn't used to praise, especially not from a man who looked like a dark god and commanded a criminal empire. "I just follow the numbers. The numbers don't lie." "No, they don't," Cassian murmured, reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingertips brushing against her sensitive skin. "Which means Leo Rossi knows his operation is compromised. And if Leo knows before—" Cassian could finish his sentence. A deafening explosion shattered the morning tranquility. The shockwave hit the library like a physical battering ram. The floor-to-ceiling windows imploded, sending a lethal storm of jagged glass hurtling into the room. Cassian reacted with terrifying speed. He lunged forward, tackling Harper out of her chair. His massive body covered hers completely as they crashed to the Persian rug, the heavy mahogany desk shielding them from the brunt of the blast. Shards of glass rained down around them, embedding into the walls, and the antique books filling the air with dust and the acrid stench of high explosives. Alarms shrieked through the estate, a piercing, chaotic wail. Gunfire erupted from the courtyard, the heavy, rhythmic thud of automatic weapons. Declan Gallagher and Leo Rossi hadn't just planned to steal from Cassian. They had planned a full-scale assassination, and they had struck the moment they realized the ledger was in the house. Beneath the heavy, crushing weight of Cassian's chest, Harper coughed, her ears ringing violently. Cassian rolled off her just enough to draw a sleek, black Sig Sauer from his shoulder holster. His dark suit was covered in dust, and a thin line of blood trickled down his cheek from a glass cut, making him look like a demon rising from the ashes. "Stay down," Cassian roared over the din of the gunfire, grabbing the collar of her sweater and pulling her tighter against the solid wood of the desk. His eyes were wide, wild, and utterly focused on her. "Do not move from this spot, Harper. Do you understand me?" Harper nodded frantically, her hands flying up to grip his thick biceps in sheer terror. "Cassian, they know I have the files. They're here for the laptop. They are here for my head." Cassian snarled, racking the slide of his weapon. "But if they want to get to you, they will have to walk through a river of my men's blood and my own before they even see your face." He pressed a hard, bruising kiss to her forehead, a fierce brand of possession amidst the chaos, before turning his weapon toward the shattered library doors. The invasion had begun, and Harper Quinn, the fat, invisible auditor from the 14th floor, was now the most valuable asset in a mob war that was about to burn Chicago to the ground. Bullets tore through the priceless antique books, shredding leather bindings, and sending a blizzard of paper and wood splinters into the air. Harper Quinn pressed herself flat against the Persian rug, her hands covering her ears, as the deafening roar of automatic gunfire echoed through the library. Beside her, Cassian Romano was a terrifying vision of lethal composure. He fired his Sig Sauer with methodical, deadly precision, his face a mask of cold fury. Every trigger pull was accompanied by a grunt or a heavy thud from the hallway, as Declan Gallagher's hitmen dropped to the marble floor. Gideon Shaw burst through the side service door, his tailored suit dusted with plaster, firing a suppressed submachine gun over his shoulder. He slammed the heavy oak door shut and engaged the deadbolt, breathing heavily. "Boss, the perimeter is completely breached." Leo gave them the gate codes and disabled the thermal cameras. "There are at least 30 heavily armed men sweeping the ground floor. We need to move to the subterranean garage immediately." The laptop Cassian barked, not looking away from the shattered glass of the library doors. Harper grabbed the drive and the machine. "Do not leave the data." Harper's hands shook violently, but her mind snapped back to the cold, rational logic of her profession. She couldn't fight, but she could secure the asset. She scrambled on her hands and knees beneath the heavy mahogany desk, grabbing the encrypted laptop and shoving her plum-colored lipstick drive into her pocket. She clutched the computer to her chest, feeling the frantic hammering rhythm of her own heart against the metal casing. "I have it," she gasped, looking up at Cassian. "On your feet," Cassian commanded. He reached down his massive hand, wrapping around her thick upper arm, pulling her up with a strength that defied gravity. He didn't drag her. He supported her, his body acting as a human shield between her and the shattered doorway. "Gideon, take the point. We take the servants' corridor to the east stairwell." They sprinted out of the library and into the dimly lit service hallway. Harper's lungs burned instantly. She was a heavy woman, built for comfort and endurance, not for high-speed tactical retreats. Her thick thighs rubbed together, and her chest heaved under the emerald cashmere sweater. But Cassian never let her fall behind. His large hand remained firmly planted on the small of her back, a constant, reassuring pressure that propelled her forward. "I'm slowing you down," she panted as they paused behind a stone pillar. The sound of heavy combat boots echoed just around the corner. "Leave me, Cassian. They want you." Cassian turned to her, his dark eyes blazing with an intensity that stole the remaining breath from her lungs. He framed her soft, flushed face with his large, calloused hands, ignoring the gunfire echoing through his ancestral home. "Do not ever say that again. You are the most valuable thing in this house. You are substance, Harper. You are real. I would burn this entire city to ash before I let them touch a single hair on your head. Now breathe. I have you." Two of Gallagher's mercenaries rounded the corner, rifles raised. Before they could even align their sights, Cassian stepped smoothly out from behind the pillar. Two suppressed shots hissed through the air. Both men collapsed instantly, lifeless before they hit the carpet. "Clear," Cassian stated coldly, pulling Harper forward again. They reached the heavy steel fire door of the east stairwell. Gideon swiped a keycard, pushing the door open to reveal the concrete steps leading down into the bowels of the estate. The descent was agonizingly slow. Harper's knees ached from the fall in the parking garage the night before, but she bit her lip, refusing to cry out. At the bottom of the stairwell, they burst into the subterranean bunker. It wasn't a standard garage. It was a reinforced concrete vault housing a fleet of heavily armored vehicles. Gideon rushed to a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon, pulling the keys from a lockbox on the wall. "Get in the back. Keep your head down," Cassian ordered Harper, opening the heavy bulletproof door for her. She practically fell onto the leather seats, clutching the laptop as if it were a life preserver. Cassian slid into the passenger seat, while Gideon took the wheel. The heavy steel blast doors of the garage began to rise. Before they were even fully open, Gideon slammed his foot on the gas. The G-Wagon roared to life, tearing out of the bunker and up the hidden ramp that emerged into the dense forest surrounding the Lake Forest property. Mud and rain splashed against the reinforced glass as they navigated the treacherous unpaved logging roads to bypass the main gate. Behind them, a plume of dark black smoke rose into the crisp morning sky, a grim testament to the war that had just ignited. Harper leaned her head back against the leather headrest, her whole body trembling violently as the adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion. She looked at the rearview mirror and caught Cassian watching her reflection. His face was smeared with soot, and blood had dried on his collar, but his gaze was fiercely protective. "Where are we going?" Harper whispered, her voice hoarse. Downtown, Cassian replied, pulling a fresh magazine from his jacket and slamming it into his pistol. "Leo Rossi thinks he has won. He thinks he can use Declan Gallagher's muscle to take my throne and use Arthur Pendleton, the corrupt deputy mayor, to shield him from the police. But he made one fatal miscalculation." "What's that?" Gideon asked from the driver's seat, his eyes scanning the tree line. Cassian turned in his seat, looking directly at Harper, his lips curling into a dark, promised smile. "He left the accountant alive. And my accountant is going to bankrupt them all." Neon lights from the Chicago skyline bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Astor Street penthouse, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the sleek, minimalist living room. The Romano safe house was a ghost property, registered to a shell corporation that Harper herself had accidentally verified during her Meridian audits 3 weeks ago. Now it was her sanctuary. The silence of the penthouse was a deafening contrast to the explosive violence of the morning. Gideon had remained downstairs in the lobby, securing the perimeter and rallying Cassian's loyal lieutenants via encrypted comms. Harper stood in the center of the master bathroom, staring at her reflection in the massive illuminated mirror. Her emerald sweater was ruined, covered in plaster dust, and a dark smear of blood from Cassian's jacket. She looked exhausted, her soft features pale, her dark hair a tangled mess. She turned the faucet, splashing cold water onto her face, trying to wash away the scent of explosives. The bathroom door clicked open softly. Cassian stepped inside. He had discarded his ruined suit jacket and tie, his white dress shirt rolled up to the elbows, revealing the heavy muscles and dark syndicate tattoos wrapping around his forearms. He held a plush white towel and a dark silk robe. "You are shivering," Cassian murmured, his deep voice wrapping around her like a physical embrace. "It's the adrenaline," Harper said, quietly, wrapping her arms around her heavy waist, suddenly feeling deeply self-conscious. In the corporate world, she hid her body behind tailored suits. Here, stripped of her armor, she felt entirely exposed to a man who existed in a world of flawless, terrifying beauty. "I'm not built for this, Cassian. I'm just an auditor. I'm fat, I'm tired, and I don't know how to survive in a war." Cassian stepped closer, dropping the towel onto the marble vanity. He reached out his large hands, gently gripping her waist. He didn't shy away from her size. His fingers dug slightly into her soft curves, a deeply grounding, possessive touch. "Look at me," he commanded softly. When she didn't look up, he placed 2 fingers under her chin, gently tilting her head until her hazel eyes met his dark bourbon gaze. "In my world, everyone is starving. They starve for power, they starve for perfection, and they vanish into nothing. But you are magnificent. You are soft where the world is sharp, and you possess a mind that rivals the greatest tacticians I have ever known. Do not ever apologize to me for the space you occupy." Harper's breath hitched. A hot tear slipped down her cheek, and Cassian caught it with his thumb. "Let me take this off," he whispered, his hands moving to the hem of her ruined sweater. Harper lifted her arms implicitly, trusting him completely. He pulled the garment over her head, tossing it aside. She stood before him in her black lace bra, her heavy breasts rising and falling, rapidly, her soft stomach exposed. Cassian didn't look at her with polite tolerance. He looked at her with blatant, consuming hunger. He traced the curve of her hip with his knuckles, sending a cascade of shivers down her spine. He draped the dark silk robe over her shoulders, pulling it snug around her thick thighs, tying the sash with gentle precision. "Thank you," she whispered, her heart swelling with an emotion she was terrified to name. "Come," Cassian said, taking her hand. "We have work to do." They moved to the expansive dining room table. Harper set up the encrypted laptop, plugging it into the secure wall port. The screen flickered to life, the offshore ledgers waiting patiently for her command. Cassian stood behind her, his chest resting against her back, his chin hovering over her shoulder. His physical presence was a steadying anchor. "Leo Rossi has Arthur Pendleton in his pocket," Harper murmured, her fingers dancing across the keys, her brilliant mind slipping back into its element. "Deputy Mayor Pendleton oversees the city's Port Authority contracts. If Leo pays him off, Declan Gallagher gets free rein to smuggle weapons and narcotics through the South Docks without police interference. Leo needs millions in clean cash to bribe Pendleton." Cassian noted his voice, low and dangerous. "Where is he pulling it from?" Harper rapidly typed a string of commands, pulling up the Kinsley Harbour bypassed funds. "He diverted your money to Trinity Holdings. But Trinity is a real estate shell. You can't hand a politician a building. You have to give him untraceable liquidity." She narrowed her eyes, tracing a newly generated routing number. "He's moving the money right now. He initiated a wire transfer 10 minutes ago from the Caymans to a private banking firm here in Chicago, First Republic Metropolitan. The account manager is Jonathan Waverley." Waverley Cassian growled. "He's a known launderer for the Irish syndicates. The funds are in a holding pattern," Harper said, her heart racing as she tapped into the bank's external firewall, utilizing a back door she had discovered during her Meridian audits. "They require a physical biometric signature to release the cash. Leo Rossi has to go to the bank in person to finalize the transfer to Pendleton's offshore accounts." Cassian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, a grim smile touching his lips. "Gideon just intercepted a police dispatch. Pendleton's private security detail is moving toward the financial district. They are meeting." Harper looked up at Cassian. "If he signs those papers, Gallagher controls the docks and you lose the city." "He won't sign them," Cassian said, stepping back from the table and pulling his heavy suit jacket back on. He checked the chamber of his weapon, the metallic click echoing loudly in the silent penthouse. He looked at Harper, his eyes filled with a lethal, absolute promise. "Because I am going to walk into First Republic Metropolitan, and I am going to show Leo Rossi what happens when you try to steal from Cassian Romano. Stay here. Lock the doors. Do not let anyone in but Gideon or myself." Harper stood up, clutching the lapels of the silk robe. "Cassian, be careful. Pendleton has the police." Cassian stepped forward, taking her face in his hands, and pressed his lips to hers in a bruising, dominant kiss that tasted of danger and absolute devotion. "I own the police, Harper, and soon I will own the Irish. Wait for me." The towering glass facade of First Republic Metropolitan Bank loomed like a modern monolith over Chicago's financial district. Inside, past the polished marble lobby and down a private mahogany-paneled elevator, lay the VIP biometric vault. It was a soundproof subterranean fortress designed for the city's ultra-wealthy to conduct their most secretive transactions. Inside the vault's conference room, Leo Rossi wiped a bead of nervous sweat from his brow. He sat across from Arthur Pendleton, the city's corrupt deputy mayor, a bloated man whose arrogance was matched only by his greed. Standing at the head of the table was Jonathan Waverley, the bespoke-suited bank manager who catered exclusively to the underworld. "The funds have cleared the Cayman holding accounts," Waverley announced, sliding a sleek black biometric tablet across the table toward Leo. $4.2 million. Mr. Rossi, I just need your thumbprint to authorize the final wire into Deputy Mayor Pendleton's Panamanian Trust. Once that is done, The Port Authority contracts will be legally transferred to Trinity Holdings. Pendleton smirked, swirling a glass of sparkling water. And Declan Gallagher brings his shipments in by midnight. A pleasure doing business, Leo. It's about time someone with vision took over the Romano operation. Leo pressed his thumb against the glowing green scanner. The machine chirped, processing the print. Before the screen could transition to approved, the heavy steel door of the vault didn't just open. It was violently kicked off its hydraulic hinges, slamming against the marble wall with a deafening crash. The temperature in the room plummeted. Standing in the doorway, flanked by Gideon Shaw and 4 heavily armed syndicate enforcers, was Cassian Romano. He was a terrifying vision of absolute, untouchable power, his dark eyes fixed on Leo with the intensity of a dying star. Pendleton gasped, dropping his glass. It shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden, suffocating silence. Waverley froze his face, draining of all colour. "Cassian!" Leo breathed, stumbling backward out of his leather chair. "You're supposed to be dead. And you are supposed to be loyal." Cassian replied, his voice a low, lethal velvet that commanded the room. He stepped inside his tailored shoes, crunching over the broken glass. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need to. His mere presence was a weapon of mass destruction. "Did you really think you could stage a coup in my city with my money without me feeling the knife in my back?" Cassian's phone vibrated in his breast pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at a secure text message sent from the Astor Street penthouse. Harper had finished her work. She had sent him the exact parameters of the digital trap she had laid the moment she hacked into the bank's mainframe. Phase 1. Leo's biometric scan acts as the decryption key, legally releasing the funds from the Caymans. Phase 2. A ghost protocol hijacks the routing number, bypassing Pendleton's Panamanian trust entirely and depositing the $4.2 million directly into Cassian's impenetrable Swiss accounts. Phase 3. An automated untraceable data packet containing all of Pendleton's offshore banking records is instantly emailed to the FBI's Anti-Corruption Task Force. Cassian smiled a dark, ruinous expression. He looked at the biometric tablet on the table. The screen flashed bright green, but instead of Pendleton's account, the confirmation displayed the crest of the Romano Swiss Trust. "What did you do?" Leo shouted, frantic, tapping the tablet. "The money. Where is it?" "It is exactly where it belongs," Cassian stated coldly. He turned his gaze to the trembling politician. "Deputy Mayor Pendleton, I suggest you retain federal counsel. The FBI just received an anonymous, fully documented tip regarding your financial indiscretions. Your career and your freedom are over." Pendleton let out a strangled sob, sinking into his chair. Cassian finally looked back at Leo. The traitor was backing away, his hand, reaching for the pistol holstered at his waist. He never made it. Cassian drew his Sig Sauer with blinding speed, firing a single silenced round. Leo dropped to the floor, a neat crimson hole in the center of his forehead. "Gideon," Cassian commanded, holstering his weapon without breaking a sweat. "Clean this up, and send a message to Declan Gallagher. If he brings his ships into my harbor tonight, I will sink them with his men inside." Cassian turned his back on the carnage, stepping out of the vault. He had an empire to rebuild, but for the first time in his ruthless life, the syndicate was not his primary concern. His mind was solely on the soft, brilliant woman, waiting for him in a silk robe high above the city. When Cassian returned to the Astor Street penthouse, the city was painted in the brilliant oranges and deep purples of sunset. He unlocked the door, stepping into the quiet sanctuary. Harper was curled up on the velvet sofa, her heavy curves draped in the dark silk of his robe, fast asleep, with the laptop still resting on the coffee table. At the sound of the door, she stirred, her hazel eyes fluttering open. She sat up quickly, panic flashing across her face, until she saw him. "Cassian," she breathed, standing up. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling her flush against his solid chest. He buried his face in her dark hair, inhaling the sweet, grounded scent of her. Harper wrapped her arms around his broad shoulders, clinging to him. "It's done," Cassian whispered against her temple. "Leo is dead. The money is secured. Gallagher is crippled." Harper pulled back slightly, looking up into his dark bourbon eyes. "And me, the Kinsley ledgers are decrypted. You have what you needed. Am I free to go?" Cassian's hands slid down to grip her thick waist, his hold possessive and unyielding. "You are free to do whatever you desire, Harper. But if you think I am ever letting you walk out of my life, you are vastly underestimating my obsession with you." He traced her lower lip with his thumb. "You are not a captive, my beautiful auditor. You are my equal. Rule this city with me." Harper looked at the terrifying, magnificent Mafia boss who had saved her life and recognized the absolute devotion in his eyes. She smiled her heart, finally finding its home in the darkest of places. "I'm going to need a much bigger desk." Cassian laughed, capturing her lips in a deep, consuming kiss. The ledger was closed, the debt was paid, and the true reign of the Romano Syndicate had just begun. What a breathtaking finale. Harper Quinn proved that intelligence and confidence are the ultimate weapons transforming from an invisible plus-sized auditor into the brilliant queen of Chicago's most dangerous mafia empire. Cassian and Harper's explosive journey shows that true power comes from fully embracing who you are, curves, brains, and all. If you were captivated by this thrilling tale of deception, high-stakes action, and dark romance, be sure to smash that like button. Share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below, letting us know your favorite plot twist. See you next time.